The clock strikes 10:17 a.m. on May 15, 1945. The distant rumble of tanks rolls through the dusty roads of a once proud German town, now silent and ghostly. Smoke drifts lazily from the smouldering ruins, and the bitter scent of burnt wood hangs heavy in the air. In the distance, a heavy C-47 Skytrain glides over the tree line, the hum of its engines stark against the eerie quiet below. The sun hangs low, casting long shadows across the sprawling fields, where rows of white tents stand in neat formation. In one of those tents, a group of women, their faces pale and haggard, sit in a stiff line along the rough canvas walls. Their hands are bound by coarse rope, and their bodies wear the marks of months of hardship. These women are the last survivors of a German auxiliary unit, now prisoners of war, captured after months of retreat through the chaos of the collapsing Reich. For these women, the war was over, but for them the world would never be the same. An American soldier steps into the tent, his face sunburned and covered in grime. He carries a cardboard box, its contents wrapped in wax paper. His boots scuff against the dirt floor as he moves, the soft sound of their scrape the only noise in the cold, sterile air. A faint smell wafts into the tent as the soldier opens the box, revealing its contents to the women in front of him. "Take a bite," he says, his voice a strange mix of amusement and something like pity. The women look at him, and then at the strange food. It's fried golden brown and crisp, unlike anything they've seen before. They hesitate for a moment, but one by one the women begin to reach for the unknown, their fingers trembling as they tear at the crispy skin. The first woman takes a hesitant bite. Her eyes widen in shock, the soft meat breaking beneath her teeth. She pauses, then takes another bite. Her face softens, and in a barely audible whisper she says, "Es ist so gut, so gut." The others follow suit, tentatively tasting the strange food, the American fried chicken. For a brief moment, the horrors of the war, the loss of loved ones, the constant bombardment of fear and anxiety melt away as the women take a bite into something they have never tasted before. Something that tastes of sweetness, of home, of comfort. It's fried, seasoned and tender, so unlike anything in the war-ravaged food rations they've known. This is not a meal. It's a revelation. The American soldier watches them, his expression softening as he realizes the significance of the moment. For these women who have known nothing but hunger and pain, this is an introduction to a world they never imagined, a world of freedom, of simple pleasures, of humanity in the strangest of places. In the aftermath of destruction, this small act, this gift of fried chicken, represents something greater, the possibility of redemption, of new beginnings and of unexpected moments of joy in the most unlikely circumstances. The women, still in shock, continue to eat in silence, the last remnants of their war-torn lives crumbling with each bite. The soldier lingers in the doorway, watching them with quiet contemplation. Outside, the wind picks up, rustling the American flags fluttering on the makeshift poles. A new chapter is about to unfold. But for now, in this small corner of the world, amidst the twisted metal and ruins, these women have experienced a moment of peace, a taste of fried chicken. A simple yet powerful gesture in the final days of a world gone mad. The war had been brutal. The years spent in conflict had left an indelible mark on Europe. But even amidst the final days of the Nazi regime, the human spirit showed glimpses of hope, of humanity, as though in the face of war's horrors, the simplest pleasures, like the taste of food, could transcend national boundaries. And for the German women, prisoners of war in that small tent in the aftermath of it all, this one moment would forever stand as a reminder that the most unexpected things, like fried chicken, could still have the power to change everything. But why fried chicken? Why this particular dish? Was it truly just a mundane part of American culture, or something deeper? A simple meal with a more profound legacy than even the soldiers could have anticipated. How did this unexpected act of kindness, so small and so simple, weave itself into the fabric of the end of the war? And why did it linger long after? As the women finish the last of the chicken, they can't help but wonder, as they glance at one another in disbelief, just what was the secret behind this strange, comforting food? How could something as ordinary as fried chicken leave such a lasting impression on the darkest of times? The questions hung in the air unanswered, as the sound of military engines rumbled in the distance. The last breath of the war had been taken by a chicken leg. But how would the taste of that moment change everything that followed? The soldiers who marched into Europe in 1944 were the product of decades of industrial growth and military innovation. They carried not only rifles and grenades, but the fruits of a new technological era, one that had transformed warfare from traditional strategies to a fast-paced, mechanized battle for survival. And as the Allied forces drove deeper into the heart of the crumbling Nazi war machine, it was not just tanks, bombers, and machine guns that gave them an edge. There was another often overlooked factor: the logistics of war, the ability to feed an army in the field. The humble chicken, it turns out, was part of a much larger strategy that would leave its mark on the end of the war. For the Germans, their war effort had always been hampered by a lack of resources. Their soldiers were often hungry, rationed to the bare minimum, and the factories back home struggled to provide even the basic equipment necessary to maintain their campaign. Meanwhile, the Allied forces, bolstered by the full might of the American industrial complex, had developed systems of logistics, transport, and food production that allowed their forces to operate with an efficiency and comfort unimaginable to their enemies. In the factories of Detroit, workers toiled day and night pumping out trucks, tanks, and ammunition at a pace that was staggering. The speed and scale of their production was unprecedented, and it meant that for the first time in history, an army could be sustained not just on battlefields, but in distant lands. The military-industrial complex had taken hold in ways that no one had anticipated. The Americans were not just fighting battles. They were winning the war through their ability to fuel their machines and feed their soldiers. This was a logistical miracle, one that Germany could not replicate. While the Germans were eating their meager rations, the Allies were feasting on hot meals, often including those small comforts that had been reserved for home, fried chicken, for example. This ability to feed an army was, in part due to the advancements in food technology. The American army had perfected a series of methods to preserve and deliver food to soldiers in the field. Canned goods, freeze-dried meals, and packaged rations all were developed in response to the need for fast, efficient, and portable sustenance. This was not just a matter of convenience. It was a matter of life and death. Soldiers who were well fed, who had the energy to fight, were more likely to survive, to push forward, to hold the line. A soldier's morale was often tied to his belly. The thought of a warm, fried chicken meal could be a source of incredible comfort during the hell of battle. Fried chicken, in particular, was symbolic of a much larger story, one of industrial ingenuity and the adaptability of the American military machine. The process that led to the creation of fried chicken in the field began long before the battlefields of Europe. It started in the kitchens of America, in the heart of the South, where the tradition of frying chicken had been passed down through generations. As the war raged on, the military needed to find ways to incorporate this tradition into their food supply chain. The ingenuity of American engineers and cooks ensured that fried chicken, that simple, comforting meal, could be preserved and shipped across oceans, from the busy kitchens of America to the farthest reaches of Europe. The challenge was immense. To get fried chicken to the battlefield required more than just a good recipe. It required innovative cooking methods and industrial-scale production. Military logistics officers worked closely with food engineers to create a system that could fry, package, and deliver the food to soldiers while keeping it fresh. They needed to develop methods that allowed the chicken to stay crisp and tasty, even after days or weeks of transport, and they succeeded. By 1945, fried chicken had become a beloved symbol of American military ingenuity, a testament to their ability to sustain their forces in the most difficult of conditions. The Germans, by contrast, were struggling with food scarcity, forced to rely on outdated methods and crumbling infrastructure that couldn't support the demands of their rapidly collapsing war effort. In one of the more curious turns of fate, it was the logistical marvel of fried chicken that would make its way into the hands of German POWs, who, despite their side's tactical advantages and industrial capabilities, had been deprived of the comforts that their enemies took for granted. The German women, captured and tired, had never known such a taste. The simplicity of the chicken, its crisp skin, its tender meat, was alien to them. For them, the war had always been about sacrifice, survival and endurance, not indulgence, as the women sat, devouring the strange food in the makeshift camp. Their minds swirled with thoughts of their homes, their families, and the war that had taken everything from them. For the Americans, however, this was not just a meal. It was a gift. A gift that symbolized the end of an era, the collapse of a tyrannical regime, and the dawn of a new world order, one where victory was not just about military superiority, but about the strength to care for those who had been left in the dust. But how did fried chicken become the symbol of this victory? The answer lay not only in the food itself, but in the people who made it happen. The engineers, the factory workers, the soldiers, and the cooks who made sure that every meal, every bite was part of a larger plan. They knew that the war wasn't just won on the battlefield. It was won in the factories, in the kitchens, in the fields, and in the hearts of the men and women who fought for a better future. Fried chicken was a symbol of that victory, but it was also a symbol of the unseen heroes who had made that victory possible. As the women sat there chewing the food that had become a part of their captivity, they could not have known just how many hours of planning, manufacturing, and logistics had gone into that single bite. It wasn't just a meal. It was the culmination of years of innovation, and it was a taste of a future they had never imagined. The Germans, with their bleak, rationed meals, had nothing like it. Their war was one of suffering, starvation, and ultimately defeat. The Americans, with their ingenuity, had brought a small piece of comfort into the lives of these women, a taste of freedom, a glimpse of the future. For those brief moments as they chewed, they experienced what it meant to be human again, to have something to look forward to, something to savor even in the midst of the chaos. But the question remained, could this small, seemingly insignificant moment, the sharing of a meal, change the course of history? Could it be the thing that defined the end of the war and the beginning of a new world? The answer would not be clear until much later, but as the last crumbs of fried chicken disappeared into the mouths of the German women, they couldn't help but wonder, could this meal, this simple gift from the enemy, be the beginning of something much greater? The story of fried chicken and its unexpected role in the end of the war might seem trivial at first glance, but in the larger scope of history, it was a powerful metaphor for the shifting tides of fate. As the war ground to a halt in 1945, the world was left with not only the scars of battle, but also a new, unspoken truth. The Allied victory was as much a product of their industrial might and logistical superiority as it was of battlefield tactics and combat prowess. The Allies, particularly the Americans, had learned the hard lessons of earlier wars, where supply lines were often the Achilles' heel. World War II had taught them that it wasn't enough to simply win battles. The ability to sustain an army, to keep them fed, to keep them moving, was just as critical to success. In the aftermath of the war, historians and military analysts would look back on the campaigns in Europe and the Pacific, and they would point to the logistics as one of the most decisive factors in the Allied victory. And at the heart of that logistics machine was the food, from rations to specialty meals like fried chicken, which kept the Allied forces running. The German military, by contrast, had always struggled with logistics. In the early years of the war, they had relied on the blitzkrieg strategy, fast, aggressive movements that overwhelmed their enemies before they had time to regroup. But as the war stretched on and the Allies closed in from all sides, the Germans found themselves spread thin. Their supply lines were stretched to breaking, their factories were bombed, and their food reserves dwindled. The soldiers on the front lines were not only outnumbered and outgunned, but they were also hungry and demoralized. The disparity between the two sides in terms of logistics and resources was vast. In the field, while German soldiers ate what they could scrounge or ration from their limited supplies, the Allied forces were sustained by the industrial power of America. Every day, countless supplies were shipped from the United States: trucks, tanks, ammunition, medical supplies, and food. The food, in particular, was an essential part of maintaining morale. It wasn't just about survival. It was about comfort, about maintaining a sense of normalcy in the middle of chaos. For the Allied soldiers, sitting down to a warm, well-prepared meal, even if it was something as simple as fried chicken, was a reminder that they weren't just fighting for survival. They were fighting for a future that promised better days. The impact of this logistical superiority was felt in every theatre of the war. The Battle of Normandy, for example, was a pivotal moment in the conflict, and the success of the Allied invasion was not just due to the bravery of soldiers storming the beaches, but also the overwhelming supply chain that supported them. The Allied forces had the resources to not only push back the German defenses, but to keep advancing, even as the Germans struggled to supply their troops. The victory in Normandy was a victory not just of military strategy, but of logistics, of having the right resources in the right place at the right time. In the Pacific, the story was similar. The vast distances between the islands and the constant threat of Japanese air and naval superiority meant that the Allies had to rely on a constant stream of supplies to maintain their foothold in the region. Again, the United States' industrial capabilities played a crucial role. The American military could maintain a steady flow of supplies, from food to fuel to ammunition, while the Japanese, whose supply lines were vulnerable and stretched thin, struggled to keep their forces operational. The ability to sustain an army, to keep them fed and supplied, was as critical to the Allied victory as any battle fought in the Pacific. The importance of logistics extended far beyond just the battlefield. It also affected the morale of both the soldiers and the civilians at home. The American public had been deeply invested in the war effort, and they understood that their factories were playing a vital role in supporting the troops overseas. The food they consumed, the vehicles they drove, and the weapons they used were all part of a massive, coordinated effort that spanned continents. For the German civilians, on the other hand, the war had become a struggle for survival. Their cities had been bombed, their factories were decimated, and food was scarce. The psychological toll of this deprivation was immense. As the war dragged on, the German civilian population began to feel the weight of their country's decline. There was no comfort in the meals they ate. There was only the hunger and the exhaustion of living in a country on the brink of collapse. In the prison camps, the contrast between the two sides was stark. The German POWs, including the women who had tasted the fried chicken, were often kept in miserable conditions. Their diet consisted of meager rations that barely sustained them, while the Allied POWs were often given more substantial meals, especially in the later stages of the war. The prisoners who had been liberated by the Allies spoke of the relief they felt, not just at being freed from captivity, but at being given food, real, nourishing food. For them, the arrival of fried chicken was not just a meal. It was a symbol of everything that the war had cost them and everything that the future held. But the psychological impact of this victory, this strange and unexpected moment of kindness, was more profound than anyone could have anticipated. The German women, who had fought for a cause that had ultimately led to their defeat, could not deny the generosity of their captors. The simple act of sharing a meal, of offering a taste of comfort amid the chaos, was an act of humanity that transcended the conflict. The Americans had won the war not just through their superior weapons and technology, but through their ability to provide for their soldiers and to show kindness, even to their enemies. The question that lingered in the air was whether this small act, the offering of fried chicken, would leave a lasting legacy. For the American soldiers, it was a small but symbolic gesture of victory, a reminder that they had not only defeated the enemy, but had shown them a different way of being. For the German POWs, it was a bitter reminder of the war's end, a war that had cost them everything. Yet in that small shared moment, there was also the seed of reconciliation. The war had taken its toll on both sides, but in the end it was the simple, human act of sharing food that spoke to the possibility of a new future, one that could transcend the bitterness of the past. As the last of the fried chicken was consumed and the prisoners returned to their quarters, the war was officially over. But for those who had lived through its horrors, the memory of that meal would live on, a reminder of the strange and unexpected ways in which victory could be tasted. And in the years to come, the story of the fried chicken would become one of the many tales told in the aftermath of the war. It would be remembered as a symbol of not just victory, but of the human capacity for kindness, even in the most desperate of times. As the soldiers departed, the sounds of war faded into the distance, replaced by the quiet hum of a new world being born. A world where, for the first time, the taste of fried chicken was more than just a meal. It was a symbol of the end of one chapter and the beginning of another. And in the years to come, the question would always linger: what could the taste of fried chicken mean in the grand tapestry of history? The answer, it seemed, lay not in the food itself, but in the gesture that had symbolized the end of a war, the end of suffering, and the beginning of something better.